Alright, to finish out this trend that I've been doing for the past 4 weeks, obviously if you figured it out, you realize that I needed a Sam Rockwell movie. So, the initial idea was Hitchhiker's Guide, as you can probably tell, or I could have doubled up on it and done Galaxy Quest with Hitchhiker's Guide, but I was talking about it with my brother, and we pretty much came to the conclusion that both of these kind of feel like callbacks or maybe odes to a certain era, like whether it be the 60s Star Trek era or the 50s monster movie era. And Hitchhiker's Guide is just kind of its own thing. Like, there's really not much you can compare it to. It just kind of has a life all its own. I'm sure we'll find an excuse to talk about it at some point. But, so, this is what I ended up landing on. And, so, yeah. Obviously, you know, if you really want to get into it, a couple other things they have in common. They're both released by DreamWorks. They both have a runtime of an hour and 42 minutes. Yeah, but but there are more similarities that are much more worth talking about. So we'll go ahead and do that. Starting with Galaxy Quest, obviously. This is something that definitely had to grow on me over the years because when it came out in 1999, when I was 9 or even 8, really, I grew up on Star Wars, so I wasn't really all that familiar with Star Trek at the time. So a lot of this was lost on me, and I just kind of thought, as a kid, that it was some goofy sci-fi comedy, and that was pretty much the end of it. And that it was like vaguely like Star Trek, is basically how I saw it back then. But then, since then, I have gotten much more familiar with Star Trek, and the not so subtle satire suddenly started to come through the cracks. So, and then it obviously becomes a totally different movie now. And when you look at it for starters, you want to look at how well the cast dives into it. It's going to be really, really important to how well this movie comes off. And Tim Allen is a really good start, because he can definitely do both of these. Like, you can totally see him as the kind of the commander, the leader, and all that of this show. Like, you can totally imagine this show actually existing, not just, you know, as Star Trek as it does, but also, but he also is able to do his own character really well as well. Because obviously, I heard that William Shatner was like all bent out of shape, like he was like in absolute denial that this was supposed to be some kind of version of him, where he said he had no idea what Tim Allen was doing and all that stuff. So yeah, we'll take Shatner's word and say, well, good. Tim Allen came up with his own whole thing. Okay, so and he's able to play both sides also because he also has to do the washed up actor. And you really get to see that in this first scene at the convention because he's so believable when he comes out, and he just like loves all this. Like, he just completely eats up what the crowd's throwing at him, and he loves saying all the old lines. Later on, we see him at home getting drunk, and he still knows all the lines to the show. But then there's the side after he overhears people calling him washed up in the bathroom. And then all it takes is this one scene of difference, and then the way he just believably hates all of it in an instant. With the when he blows up at Justin Long and says there's no goddamn ship. And it doesn't feel like some abrupt character change. We can totally see that maybe this whole, you know, loving what the crowd's giving him is some kind of facade, and he's fully aware of where he is in his life, which is why he eats all this up so much. He plays all those facets of the character really convincingly, and even more so when he does actually have to become some sort of action hero at the end. He's able to pull that off just as well. So, just on all fronts, it's really such a shame that he's not as, like, active. I know it's somewhat out of his control in regards to how active he is, but still, it does make you kind of miss the kind of actor we had in him with movies like this, to where he could be the face of them and just really do so many great things with characters like this. And then you've got the next one worth noting would easily be Alan Rickman as so obviously not Leonard Nimoy, I suppose. where he's the guy that's on the opposite end. He doesn't want to do all the lines, even though that's all he's known for. The interesting thing I love watching this movie is the fact that we never see him outside of that makeup. Like, we never see, like, Alan Rickman in this movie, or Alexander Dane for that matter. So it's like, it's kind of another way of also saying he's just always stuck with this character forever, that we never actually get to see the actor outside of the makeup. Even when he's at home, he's taken off and changed everything except for the makeup. Towards the end, we start to see his hair coming through a little bit, but we still, 90% of what's on his head is the makeup. So I really love that kind of visual way of showing that he's constantly stuck in the character. And also Sigourney Weaver, of course, kind of interestingly playing against type, because obviously when you think of Sigourney Weaver in this environment, you think of Ripley kicking everybody's ass. And she's the one stuck with the role of, all she has to do is just say what the computer says, and she doesn't really get to do anything. She has to show off her cleavage, all that stuff. And the way that, and I love the fact that we set these up, like, it's like, oh yeah, we recognize Tim Allen's type, we recognize Rickman's type, we recognize the Weaver character. But the entire movie is about desperately trying to get out of those types, as opposed to the writers just saying, well, they are those types and that's the joke, the end. Which is what they could have done, and a lazier writer most certainly probably would have tried to get away with. But, like, a massive amount of this movie, that's the joke, is that they're trying to desperately do anything but what they're known for. Which brings out a lot of interesting kind of what they do with the satire and all that stuff, but they do find ways to go beyond it and also make it quite poignant at some points, even as funny as they go as well. Because there is, obviously, one of the great things about this movie kind of doing the meta thing and realizing the cliches and all that stuff is Rockwell's character of Guy, where they do so many great things with this character. And I think this is, like, even today, Sam Rockwell's got such a reputation now. Before this award season, he was the underrated guy. And it was always like, Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, or The Green Mile, or Moon, or whatever, and Assassination of Jesse James. But then, so many people brought up Galaxy Quest, and obviously, once again, I said I wasn't into this for a long time, so for a long time I was like, oh yeah, I keep forgetting Sam Rockwell's even in that, because I didn't really see what the big deal was. But going back now, it's like, oh, okay, he's the funniest character, or he's right up there. It's him or Rickman, they're battling for it. But the great thing about this is all the different ways they play it, because it really, you could just see it as, like, it's a one-joke idea. It's a red shirt joke, just with this whole character. But the way they keep playing with that, and they actually kind of take it in different directions sometimes, like when he actually calls out and says, wait, like, he actually tries to figure out throughout the movie which character he is, which is kind of like what they did with Danny in Last Action Hero, when he realizes at the very wrong moment that he's the comedy sidekick and not the hero. So Guy is trying to figure out through the whole movie, like, oh, so I'm the guy that dies, so you know how serious the situation is. I'm the guy that dies, and the second we step onto another planet. But then he kind of has an epiphany towards the end where he's like, wait a minute. What if I'm like the underdog? What if I end up being the guy that was down here and then I end up being the hero? But then, no, there's always that possibility he's just the red shirt. And I love the way they play with that joke also when they first get to the planet. It's something really said really quickly by Sigourney Weaver that I just find hilarious every time, which is when they realize that those cute little things are actually not cute at all. They're a huge threat, and they got the sharp teeth and all that. And as they're running away, Sigourney Weaver says they have to figure out what to do and to get off this planet before one of these things kills Guy. It's like, doesn't kill us, doesn't put us all in danger. We've basically come to terms with the fact now that Guy would be the first one to die in any fatal scenario, which is hilarious. But then, once again, they turn that whole thing, and also the whole thing of, we never learn his last name till the end. To where it's like, that's what makes him expendable through the whole thing, is that he never bothers to, he points out, you guys don't even know my last name, but we still never bother to learn it until the credits at the end. But one of my favorite things, the way that they kind of bring this out and kind of really turn it on its head in this really kind of just passing way is at the end when they've blown up Saris' ship, but they don't realize that he's actually come back in the form of Tony Shalhoub. And then when he takes his normal form, he shoots everybody, and it's this big, you know, horrible, tragic thing where all the main characters are gonna die before they turn back time. But the thing is that Saris shoots every major character in this scene, except for Guy. Guy is the last one standing in this scenario before they turn it back. And I've always thought that was really... because they don't even draw attention to it. It's just one of those things where you just kind of have to watch the bodies drop. And then you're just kind of waiting for Guy to be the next one, and he's just standing there afraid the whole time before they figure out how to fix it. So I always thought that was kind of brilliant, too. Especially, because that's the thing, too, is the stuff that they barely draw attention to is the stuff that really stands out. This movie knows when to kind of show off its jokes in a big way, and when to kind of put those little things in there, too, that don't, you know, scream, this is a reference, or this is a joke, or something. So that's great. But then there's also the way the action is handled, because I like the fact that this movie, once again, could have taken the easy way out. But obviously the concept kind of gives them a task to get through, because the thing here is, when you look at the old Star Trek show, or even the movies for that matter, or at least the ones with the original crew, the action really wasn't much of the focus. It was more about, to me anyway, like how the crew interacted and those different characters and how they kind of, you know, their camaraderie or the way they butted heads, just all that stuff. And then, obviously, given the time period that it was, the action is basically, let's turn the camera sideways and have some sparks go off. It's pretty much the extent of it. Some fake-looking lasers or whatever. But, here we realize that we're stuck in this... the whole point is that we're in the real world. And they could have just said, well, let's make the action kind of hokey because it's like a callback or whatever. But they do seem to fully embrace the fact that the whole concept is that this isn't the TV show, this is real. So they do try to amp it up with the action a little bit and do make the scenes exciting. Well, also, there's probably a little bit in there where it seems like they're kind of doing the... it's mostly interior action. But they do handle the exterior stuff with that really well. And another way they handle this is what the villain looks like. Where he's like... this is another one of those cases where they could have played it safe and they say, well, it's a callback, let's just make him look really hokey. But no, this guy's supposed to be like a real-life, like, badass alien villain. So his appearance really... He looks like a living, breathing being all the time. To where, like, you can just... like, the scene where he says, you're sweating, and then we see him, and it's like, you can actually see him, like, glistening. And there's all those different parts to his get-up that are mostly unidentifiable. Like, the things on his back, the way they kind of react when he's angry, or the way the things on his head just kind of move by themselves at some point. The earrings... they actually really went into detail with how this guy looks like he'd be this, you know, I mean, it's hard to say genuine alien bad guy or whatever, but it's one of those cases where, should this scenario be real life? Yeah, you kind of imagine that's what it would be. That's what they would look like if you really wanted to make them threatening. So, I thought they handled that very well as well. And then, obviously it goes into a lot of different things in regards to kind of the whole differentiating acting and real life and all that. They have a lot of fun with that, but also really take it in some interesting, like I said before, more poignant directions. With the way they're discussing with the... oh shit, what was his name? Veronica Mars's dad. Oh shit, I've seen this movie like 10 times now and I forgot his damn name. Mathazar, something like that. When they're talking to him, and it's basically their secret is going to come out. That they're just actors and that none of this was ever real until now. And the way he just plays that off is like, oh yes, we've seen, you know, deception before with him, the villain, and then it's kind of this whole, oh, even though we're just, you know, pretending to be people, it's like, are we really better than the villain in this sense? Because that's what they associate what acting takes with being deceived by this horrible villain before. Um, and then there's the whole, and the way they kind of have to dissect that and kind of realize the absurdity of acting, and just like pretending in general for a living and putting on costumes and shit. But it is one of those things where you do get so caught up in it, sometimes you have to be reminded of the concept by Alan Rickman's character when they're just kind of talking, and then he actually has to stop and say, okay, but you do remember that he's not wearing a uniform, that's just a costume, right? And then even as an audience, we're kind of like, oh, yes, I kind of got swept in it, but that's true. This person is not supposed to be doing this at all. Everybody is completely and totally faking. But the adventure really starts to unfold in such a way, in such an effective way, that we get lost in it just like that. So I do really appreciate that. And another thing that really makes this work is the aliens that they're helping are actually quite sympathetic characters, especially in their design. The way that they're just constantly smiling, like all the time. That's just their faces permanently. That's what they look like. Where it starts off, I guess there's something a little creepy about them at the start, especially when they're outside his damn window. But they very quickly become likable in many different ways, but that is a part of it. But then there's also some genuinely kind of touching or sad moments, like when he's talking about them going back to their home planet or whatever to be with their kind, and the way he just casually informs him, oh, no, we're all that's left. Like, we're it. Because so much shit has gone down. But once again, they say all this stuff with those permanent smiles, and it's like, it makes it even more tragic. And even more kind of into... You really want to see everything turn out positive. Like, you do get invested in them because of all this. Like, all the characters because of this. And the way they combine some of this stuff, like the scene when he confesses to him, and I do like the way that they end up playing that off when he just assumes that, oh, they were just doing that so Saris wouldn't believe what was going on or whatever, to deceive him, and they just let that go, which was easily the best thing to do. They didn't do the whole bullshit, no, let's do a real lie reveal because I feel so bad about this thing, because that would have just been a disaster. But thankfully this movie constantly knows how to avoid disastrous cliches and all that stuff, but also maybe embracing them for the better. But there's also scenes like talking about cliches. Like, they're obviously the scenes they're playing with the cliches actually ends up helping in a big way. Like the fact that the clock is designed to just stop there, stop at 1, just because that's what the cliche is. But then there's also the stuff that kind of looks like a cliche, like when the one guy gets shot and dies in Rickman's arms. And then you could sit back and say, well, yeah, but this guy was just kind of hanging around. I mean, he had a couple of things to do, but overall, I don't know that he earns this big dramatic death scene where he has to say his last words and then just kind of pass on dramatically. But it's like, then you realize this death scene isn't for him, it's for Rickman. It's the turning point for him. It's not necessarily we have to focus on, oh, it's so sad that this guy died. It's how Rickman reacts to it that's just the strength of the scene. Now it gives him that extra will to fight for this dude, so I do think that definitely works as well. And also, you'll notice that it's to my understanding this movie was supposed to be dirtier. Like, this was supposed to be an R-rated movie for sure, and there's actually still some evidence lurking around. The most blatant being the ADR change of Sigourney Weaver when she sees the machinery and says, fuck that. You can clearly see that screw that is dubbed over her fuck that mouth. But the great thing about this is usually when you look at this you think, oh, what would the R-rated version have been like? Like, what other kind of, jokes or all that other stuff were we missing out on? But this is one of those movies where it's kind of like, one of its huge strengths, I think, is its innocence. How it's just, like, especially when, like I said, you look at the aliens and all that, and how sympathetic it makes everybody, and how much it gets you invested in them. I don't know, I feel like there's just an innocence to this movie that's such a strength that the movie would not have if they tried to go kind of more adult-themed with it. I think it definitely, absolutely, 100% works as this kind of almost like family sci-fi movie, if you will, to give it some kind of genre. I think it's above being a kids movie, but family is about where it's at, that PG territory. Not to say there aren't some fucked up scenes still. The monster that turns it, the fly scene where the monster turns inside out and explodes, or when one of those bald creatures is attacked by all the other ones when we think it's defenseless. No, there's still some dark shit in here for sure. But like I said, there's still an innocent quality to it that I think definitely it's the material's in the perfect place and doesn't need to be tampered with one way or the other. It doesn't need, some extra fucks. It doesn't need sex jokes or anything like that. It's pretty much found the perfect place right here, because that's pretty much, because the Star Trek TV show was in that, PG territory. But I do understand maybe taking that PG territory and saying a behind-the-scenes sort of thing would be, much more not that. But yeah, I do think that it's, content-wise, we kind of found the perfect in-between here, without making it too safe. So that's really important. And then, yes, of course, one of the things to point out is, I was talking about the way Shatner apparently feels about this, but obviously the most touching thing is if, apparently a lot of Star Trek actors had positive reactions to this, but the one that always really stands out, and the story I think most people know, is the fact that Patrick Stewart didn't want to see it because he thought it made fun of the fans, and Jonathan Frakes saw it and said, no, see it now and see it with a crowd. And the thing that really touched Patrick Stewart is the fact that what all this comes down to is that the fans and their devotion are what saves the day. Justin Long and his friends, knowing the ins and outs of the ship and how everything works because they're so obsessed, actually, they're the ones that know how to do everything because of this. And their fandom actually paid off in a really big way, and makes them like the heroes of this. The whole thing to where it's like, celebrities are nothing without their fans and all that, where it's like, now you can say the fictional characters live or die by how passionate the fans are. And so, yeah, that's definitely a really nice way to look at it. And I love the fact that they're so into it and they're so obsessed and they're so just convinced of all this. The scene when, obviously, at the beginning they plant the seed where it's like, Justin Long's world has been destroyed because, Jason Nesmith said, fuck off. But then, nothing's real and all that. And just as Justin Long's characters come to terms with that at the end, and it's time that he needs to kick it into gear, it's like, oh, by the way, it's totally real. And that's all he needs to say, and Justin Long is right back in it. He's like, I knew it. I knew it the whole time. So that's always real. That's a very endearing quality to this movie. And like I said, adds to that innocence of it that might have been tainted trying to make it a dirtier movie for not much of a particular reason. And yes, and best of all, all this stuff, all the ins and outs of, like, celebrity and, character development and all this stuff, fan bases and their importance and all that. But really, the thing that just really, really helps this movie, the thing that really stands above everything else I've ever said about this movie just now, is, it's just funny as hell. It is funny, like, constantly. They definitely have those little dramatic moments they put in there to, like, raise the tension and all that, and we've got the action scenes and all that. But all in all, the movie is so consistently funny, and the laughs can be so big. Even like, the simplest things can just get really big laughs with how they're presented, or the kind of... And not always relying on that kind of in-joke quality. It helps a lot. But you don't necessarily need it to get some of these big laughs. Like, even in some cases, when they're doing, like, the action scenes, when they're... they even manage to put some comedy into those and not just make them straight action scenes or straight drama scenes or all that. Sometimes they find ways of injecting the comedy in all of this stuff. Like when they catch Weaver basically doing her thing of just saying what the computer says. She just does out of habit now because it's her only job. And it's like, and as an actor, it's like, don't take her lines away from her. She might as well do it. Or Rickman, complaining that, if you're going to go through the field, try not to run into every single thing. And there's just so much, and like this would be the point in time where I say, well, this particular scene is funny, or this particular scene, that particular scene. But that's the thing is that the movie is so consistently funny. It's just full of this stuff, and it's one of those. Really, it's kind of rare these days to find a movie to where you are just laughing almost nonstop. Like I said, this movie managed to pull that off while also throwing in some dramatic stuff. So, yeah, it all just comes together so nicely, and really, I mean, I know this is getting to be a very overused phrase, but I mean, for real, the movie's about to be 20 years old next year, so yeah, you can say this. It really does hold up well. Like, it really, really does. So, that's what that is. And obviously, this is, once again, it took me a few years to really get into this movie the way that I have, but now I've seen it, like, I don't know how many times now, so... It's one of those movies that's very easy to where, like, if you just need something on, maybe while you're doing something else or whatever, this is usually at the top of that pile, to where it's like, when all else fails, it's a Galaxy Quest day. So, so it's always reliable for that. Evolution, I remember kind of being a big deal when it was out, but that's mainly because, believe it or not, if you happen to be a slightly younger person watching this, yeah, Orlando Jones was actually the shit at one point for like a couple of years, and Seann William Scott obviously being fresh off American Pie, and Duchovny kind of being in that similar X-Files world, but in a comedy from Ivan Reitman of all people. And so, obviously you can tell when you know that, going in, that, when you see Ivan Reitman's name on it, and you see they actually say from the maker, they can't, obviously Todd Phillips directed Road Trip, so they can't say director, but it has to say from the maker of Ghostbusters and Road Trip. That they're, yeah, it's pretty clear that they are trying to get kind of, they're kind of trying to revamp the feel of Ghostbusters with these, particularly with the scenes of, Duchovny and Orlando Jones kind of sitting around and having science banter while attempting to be funny as well. I think it goes without saying much more successful than Ghostbusters. But they try. Duchovny and Orlando Jones do try. But, yeah, and then we end up... Here's okay. To bring Galaxy Quest back into this, I will say this. I don't know if it's Ivan Reitman's name exactly that's making me think this or what, but and obviously not to say this is about Ghostbusters or anything, but like Ivan Reitman made some dirty movies back in the day, like Stripes, for instance, and it's kind of like you watch this and you kind of think, unlike Galaxy Quest, I think Evolution is definitely a movie that could have benefited from being darker. And it almost seems like there were some cases where maybe that was going to be the idea, and then it was watered down at the last minute. I'm not really sure, but this is definitely a movie where I do think it could have benefited from that, because we have this stuff, like there are people that are killed in this movie. They are eaten and killed. Obviously Galaxy Quest has like 1 or 2 deaths in it, but I mean, this is like, you know, eaten by giant monsters levels. And the thing is that, like, we're more, I guess you could say, in like a Jurassic Park sort of way. Some of these aliens are very much kind of dinosaur-like. But the thing here is that combining this, like, I don't know if I'm trying to say if you, like, drench this movie in blood or anything, but it's like, for instance, the scene when the guy is killed on the golf course. And it's like, honestly, John Powell has quite a resume when it comes to scores, but I think the score is actually something that really does the movie in here, because you have moments where, like, there's the girl that gets attacked in the mall, or like I said, the guy getting dragged away on the golf course, but you have this music that's almost like it's out of some comedy about a kid and his dog or something. It's like, it's such a misplaced score, especially for some of the scenes that it's in. To where it's like, this guy is being dragged away to his violent death where he's going to be chomped to death by this alien creature, and they're playing music as if to say, oh no, there he goes, oh, look at the predicament he's in. And it's like, that's... I feel like this movie could push it a little more, to say the least. Because there's a lot of scenes like that that are done in by the score, where everything is supposed to be, like Like, some horrific things are happening, but the score is like, let's be wacky and fun. It's like, you see this guy being eaten by an alien to a score that would fit just as well as watching a dog run across a dinner table. And it's like, it just doesn't fit one. It just doesn't come together. And they also happen to steal the same scene from Galaxy Quest, where we have the alien that looks cute at the start, but then is actually an ugly threat that will bite you and or kill you. Once again, works better in Galaxy Quest. Now, and it might sound like I'm already hating on Evolution. It's not so much that. Evolution does have its charms. Particularly when when Duchovny and Orlando Jones are like bantering, I don't know, it's not exactly, it could be funnier, it could be more clever is the problem, because the thing is once again, they're trying to recapture that thing to where it's like, when Aykroyd and Murray would banter in Ghostbusters, you felt like it was two really brilliant scientists bantering, and it made the movie feel smarter despite the silliness of it overall. And this movie Reitman's clearly trying to get that again, but there's just, it feels like it's lacking the smarts in it. It does feel more like one is just like Orlando Jones is desperately trying to get laughs with like some expression or just some, you know, random race joke or whatever. And Duchovny's doing his best to just kind of do the deadpan thing. But it feels like, and it seems like these two things should mesh. But for me, it just kind of feels like it's just kind of one dead-end line followed by another dead-end line. And I know this actually worked for a lot of people, but it really kind of drains the movie of this kind of smart quality that Ghostbusters had going for it that would have done something. And I know you would probably think, like, well, if they just tried to copy the style of Ghostbusters, then that's all it would be, is derivative. But I really feel like this movie could have benefited from feeling a little smarter about itself. But of course, it's also one of those movies where you kind of get this sense, because it's one of those movies where when, like, some big action is going on, or there's, like, some big plan about how to do this, or how to stop the aliens from doing that, you have a lot of characters who pretty much are just here to say what's going on while it's happening, or what is about to happen. And so, yeah, and that's where we bring in, like, Julianne Moore, where it's... she's the character where... I mean, she's Julianne Moore, who is, like, one of the best actresses ever. And here, number one, she absolutely refuses to emote at all. And secondly, they gave her a running joke. They gave her a shtick. And that is to trip over things or run into things. I don't really know... like, if this had ultimately led to something, like, if she maybe accidentally fell over... but it ultimately, like what Ed did in Good Burger when he ended up destroying Mondo Burger, where his clumsiness actually made something go out of his control that ultimately helped them, and destroy the big threat or whatever it is. Like, if she had accidentally stopped the mother alien just by accidentally doing something stupid, there would be a reason for this character trait, and for them to keep bringing it back. But this is just kind of a dead-end thing that is, like, wheezing desperately for that one laugh. Or it's like, I feel like we've gone a little while without a laugh. Like, Orlando Jones hasn't made a face recently, and Sean William Scott hasn't done his kind of, oh yeah, thing, or whatever the fuck he's doing here. And so, it's like, we'll just have Julianne Moore fall over. And maybe because she's, like, an actress with prestige behind her, maybe that's the joke. Because it's Julianne Moore falling on her face for no reason, or running into doors or whatever. Maybe that's the joke, but it just doesn't add up. And it wouldn't matter necessarily if it added up or not, if it was funny when it happened. But that's the problem too, is it's not really that funny when it happens. And so, but we do have an interesting setup here, doing this whole alien thing amidst this Ivan Reitman comedy. And it is kind of like I was talking about recently with A Futile and Stupid Gesture, when it's like, it's clearly a comedy, and it's got an interesting enough story, but the trouble is it's like, the story is more interesting than the comedy is funny. To where it's like, you're watching it, and you're into it, but you're not laughing, to the point that you almost kind of forget you're watching a comedy until somebody tries to say or do something funny again. And so that's kind of where a lot of the problems here are. And there are obviously moments like, it's not totally without laughs. Like we have obviously there's the still very famous scene when the bug gets inside Orlando Jones' skin, and they have to take him to the doctor and all that stuff, the whole amputating and all that. And there's the whole, like, oh, it's headed for his testicles, take the leg and all that. Or it comes out of his ass or whatever. He needs ice cream for his ass. But it's like the funniest line in this scene, by far, just goes by really quickly. It's when when it's in his leg and they're trying to stop him from taking the leg. And he's like, no, don't take my leg. Whatever you do, don't take my leg. And Duchovny looks at the doctor and says, no, don't take his leg. He thinks he's an athlete. It's like that line just comes and goes very quickly, but you kind of, in all the hullabaloo, you kind of miss it. And it's the funniest line in there. Yeah, so you have stuff like that that's kind of funny in kind of a smaller way. But then, but like I was saying, though, it's an interesting approach in regards to the story itself. But then again, it's kind of like, and I suppose, I would have said this is a problem, but maybe it's more interesting. It kind of shows kind of a different, there's some creativity going on to this, but it's like, how many different ways we have aliens in this movie. Because there's the ones that are like, once again, like they're from a 1950s monster movie or whatever. Then there's some that are almost like dinosaurs. There's the one that's like from Trog, he might as well be. Or the monster that's in the crate in Creepshow seems like he's hanging around here. Yeah, but that's the thing is, even though I kind of like that we're getting a bunch of different stuff in regards to designs of aliens and all that, whether the effects are good is kind of back and forth. But it kind of feels like also like kind of a lack of direction, like an idea of what exactly they want to do. And so we're kind of get like all kinds of different eras of monsters, it seems. But yeah, I suppose that kind of takes away some redundancy that would have been there, so that's fine. But then it is definitely a movie that feels like it's a movie from 2001. Like, it's absolutely a movie from 2001. Kind of like, it has laughs in it, like comedy bits in it, like somebody talking about protocol, and Duchovny grabbing himself and saying, I've got your protocol right here. It's like, I can't imagine that being too funny to somebody in 2018, but in 2001, absolutely. Like I said, all the different kind of race jokes from Orlando Jones, like, oh yeah, that's that weird thing that white people do, or the tire cliche of, like, there was the tire cliche of the black guy always dies first, and then after a while there was the tire cliche of the black guy saying the black guy always dies first. So we got that joke in here back when it was still relatively fresh when it was doing the meta thing in regards to that. And there is the whole, there's one particular moment in this movie where Duchovny moons Ted Levine, and you would think, judging by the music, that this was the comedy highlight of the entire movie. You've got people talking rapidly as it happens, you've got the music just beating you over the head with how wacky the shit is, and it's like, Duchovny whipped his ass out. Is this really the peak of hilarity this movie's gonna get to? I don't know. So, but yeah, but it is one of those cases also where it's like, it just seems like they added shit sometimes to, like, differentiate this from an episode of The X-Files, where it's like, you see Duchovny and you see his environment, and you're like, oh shit, people are gonna think this is The X-Files, we better throw a random dick joke in there or something. This is one of those movies where, once again, we're thriving in 2001. There is a completely pointless scene of our three main characters singing in a car. That's what the scene is. And you know, yes, people singing Play That Funky Music, White Boy was very popular back then. Like, this was still in that territory between 2000 and 2002. I don't know how many movies that song ended up in, but it was quite a few. And it's just one of those things where it really sticks out. It's like, okay, I remember appreciating this back then, but strictly back then. It's very much, like, stuck in 2001. This is not a movie that's going to extend beyond that. So it's the question of if that's still If the stuff that was funny 17 years ago still holds up for you, then you should be fine. But it's like, and that's the thing too, to bring in like Seann William Scott into this, to where it's like, this is definitely, Seann William Scott is definitely another case to where I feel like this being like an R-rated movie would have been much better, because Seann William Scott is one of those rare people where, like, usually you would say people don't have to, you know, constantly be talking up sex or profanity or vulgarity or whatever to be funny. Like if they're funny, they have a wider range of what they can do, and they don't have to resort to that. But Seann William Scott is an actor that just like that's his area, like that's his forte. And when you see Seann William Scott on like PG-13 material, it's like you can just see him being held back. And it's like, because I know it sounds like an insult, but it's really not, because that area is what he's good at. He excels at it. That's why Stifler became this massive breakout character. That's why he's one of the best characters in Road Trip. He's probably my favorite character in Road Trip, because he handles that stuff so well, that style of comedy. And so here, in a PG-13 movie, it's like he has nothing to do. Like, nothing whatsoever. He has to make noise. The kaka toki toki thing is funny, like the first couple times, but then after a while you're just like, oh, this guy is just really kind of been comedically castrated for this movie, and it gives this character nothing. I think, like, and it's almost like because American Pie and Road Trip were so popular when this came out, it's like, it's one of those cases where just because it's him, we're supposed to just kind of laugh, just find it inherently funny because it's him, without him even having to do anything. Just his presence alone is supposed to elicit a laugh. And I don't really, especially 2018, I'm not really getting that. And it only works so often. Obviously, I don't care for the Goon movies, but at least there it felt like he was in his comfortable ground. And here it just makes the character a dead end. Like, he brings them the creature from the country club. And, like, I think he points something important out later just by saying, hey guys, look. And that's pretty much all Wayne does in this. And so it's not particularly funny because it just feels like a watered-down rehash of his other characters. Like, he has those inflections in his voice and his deliveries. Like, he's saying things the same way those more successful characters do. But when what he's saying doesn't matter or isn't funny, or what he's doing isn't that funny, then what do you have? Just an actor with a recognizable name and face. That's what you've got. And he's really not, and he and Moore aren't really the only characters that kind of just fall flat. There's also, when you look at characterization, what's done with Duchovny. What's done with Duchovny here is really confusing, because he's got like a whole other side to him, but for some reason they're taking their sweet-ass time telling us that. Because, I mean, here he's just doing the deadpan banter with Orlando Jones, and he's the teacher, and he seems like a charming enough teacher. He's like, hey, you guys all got A's, and that's like, oh, he must be really good at his job and all that, and he's like, oh, well, you know, you guys didn't get A's, and he commits their shitty essays from Remember Ethan Suplee and Donkey Lips from Salute Your Shorts. You know, the idiots that ultimately saved the day cliche. Not the same thing as the fans save the day thing in Galaxy Quest, not even close. But there is something kind of charming about him, but then at the same time, like half an hour into the movie, we learn a whole bunch of shit about him. And once we learn all this shit, it's kind of like, oh, well, I was charmed by this character, but now that you're telling me all this stuff so late, I realize, what a boring portrayal of this character, because this guy's got so much going on, and you guys aren't showing us shit. It's like, he's just a normal dude, he's just a teacher, and then half an hour in, there's barely an hour of the movie left at this point, they're like, oh, well, he was this big thing, he used to, like, work for the Pentagon, he caused all these people, there's a dude that wants to kill him on sight as soon as he sees him, and we're not made aware of this at all, of this dude, in the first half hour. It's just so sudden, and it's like, oh yeah, this guy fucked up so many people, they named an illness after him, and even his buddy Orlando Jones doesn't know this. It's like, okay, so there's clearly a lot of things missing from this character, but then, even after we learn all that, it really doesn't make much of a difference, even though it seems like we're suddenly knowing so many different things about this character we didn't before, when it's way too late to care at this point. And yeah, what does it do? I guess it gives him some redemption to his reputation when all this goes down at the end, but it's like, it doesn't matter because the movie has an anticlimax. It's like, they do this whole thing when it's like, there's this whole big reveal of what's going to stop them, and then there's this whole thing about Ted Levine and Ty Burrell want to blow it up, and only blowing it up is going to make it much bigger, and then it's going to divide, and then what the fuck are we going to do? And then there's this whole big epiphany thing that's in all these damn movies where it's like, oh, the shampoo can do it. So they fill a fire truck with hundreds of gallons of shampoo, and that's what they're going to fight with. So the climax is drawing it out and drawing it out and drawing it out until we get to the absolute final moment that the world could end or whatever, and they're like, oh shit, yeah, that's right, we filled up a fucking fire truck full of shampoo earlier. I guess it's time we use that now. and then it just fucking ends. It's like, so yes, I know you're probably wondering, why are you watching Evolution for the characters? Well, number one, if you look at like Galaxy Quest shows you that you can do so much with the stuff you're already doing if you have that much investment with the characters, if the characters are that well-rounded. Even in stupid comedies like this, that can make all the difference. It really can. And like I said, it seemed like they really could have done that because they added so much to his character, just it seemed like at the last minute. Oh, by the way, people want to kill this dude. By the way, he's responsible for a shitload of people like almost dying from being sick. I mean, he used to work for the Pentagon. There are so many interesting things we could go into with this dude. But it's like, but the point of Duchovny's character is that he's deadpan and just, talks to Orlando Jones. That's where the laughs are. I don't know. So, there's that. So but, I mean, overall, still, even despite all of that, there is somewhat of a charm about it, which probably has a lot to do with, like if you saw Evolution around the time it came out, it could, and I really fucking hate when people say this, and, say that this is the only reason people like a movie. It just drives me up the fucking wall. But honestly, in regards to Evolution, I can kind of see it because it's just stuck in that time period. I kind of feel like a lot of the charm of Evolution just comes from remembering the comedies of that era that totally don't age well, especially with their humor. Where it's kind of like, I feel like, whenever I watch this, I feel like I'm watching it in 2001. For the most part. Obviously 2017 or 2018 will kick in and it'll be like, this type of humor just doesn't work anymore. Back 20 years ago, fine, but here it's just not funny anymore. But yeah, it does, if you're able to kind of get your mind back there, yeah, it might still work for you, potentially. But that's really what it comes down to, is at one point, there's a bug going up Orlando Jones' ass, and then the movie ends with the reverse. Orlando Jones going up a bug's ass. The end. That's the big life lesson from Evolution. That's what it is. And we do have a lot of people here, some of who were like, there's, like, obviously seeing Aykroyd in it will bring back, old Reitman memories, which is fine. Then there's some people that weren't as big then as they are now, like Sarah Silverman as the ex-girlfriend. And then there's some stuff you kind of want to make note of, like Julianne Moore being in this. This was the same year that she did Hannibal. And it's like, there's a scene where she's butting heads with Ted Levine. And it's like, oh, new Clarice butting heads with Buffalo Bill. That's interesting to see. But that's, but I mean, apart from that, it's very vague with its characters, and like I said, when it comes down to it, you put Julianne Moore in a movie and you're like, oh, I know what her shtick is, she just falls over. And it's like, and they also tried to build this thing up too, the whole love story between them. It just feels like this really misguided thing that's just taking up time. where a lot of the jokes come from Orlando Jones saying like, hey, what does that ass-shaped alien remind you of? I saw the way she was looking at you, and it's like, it's like he met her not just Orlando Jones, we have known her for one scene. And he looks at that alien, he's like, hey, who does that remind you of? It's like, I don't fucking know, Orlando Jones, who are you talking about? Oh, you're talking about the woman we just met once. I mean, obviously she's from the company's past, but it's like, and then that joke goes on and on and on. The "oh, Ira" thing. It just goes on and fucking on, and all I'm sitting here thinking is, this dude just met this woman. What does he even think he's referencing? And I don't know. But, humping joke equals funny in 2001. So, so I don't know. So, it might sound like I hate Evolution. I don't. I've seen it a few times. Especially when it was on VHS in 2001. But, like I said, some movies just kind of grow out of what makes them funny. Evolution does that. Galaxy Quest does not. Galaxy Quest, I think, is always going to be funny. Always going to be charming. Always going to have great characters. Always make you care about what's in it. And yeah, but once again, something that just accomplishes what it sets out to do so well, like Galaxy Quest does. It almost seems unfair to just throw in a silly movie like Evolution or whatever, but I mean, the fact that Evolution seems like it has the potential is kind of why you would want to talk about it and go into it and just not dismiss it as, oh, it's just being silly, leave it alone. But it's like, yeah, but it really could have been something, especially when you've got Ivan Reitman behind it and so many talented people. I mean, good God. But yeah, I think it definitely falls short, so that's what that is. It was the movie that was like fun to quote with your friends in elementary school, but when you're 27, it's just Evolution. So that's, well, maybe not. So so yes, that is going to end this. I think next week we're going to go into Assassins. Yeah, we're not really gonna be leaving the Oscar trend I've been doing either, so just completely by coincidence. So, and then, as per tradition, I think, maybe it's somewhat of a tradition, I don't know, but on Oscar Sunday you'll get one that's, one of the movies involved is going to be a Best Picture winner. We're going to be going way back to the 40s. I don't know how many people are interested in that, but yeah, it's going to be a Best Picture from the 40s, but two really, really great movies. Very sinister ass movies we're going to be talking about on Oscar Sunday. So if that interests you, then yes. So, and obviously I'll be seeing Black Panther tomorrow, and we'll be talking about that. So that's what we have to look forward to. So until then,